Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Wesley Walters was the first one to question whether there were revivals in 1820 near Palmyra. So we're going to talk about that charge with Dr. Steven Harper. He's the author of First Vision, Memory and Mormon Origins, published by Oxford University Press. It's a wonderful press. And so we'll talk more about that and find out if there is evidence of any religious excitement in the area. So check out our conversation.
I guess one of the things that I found really striking was why you chose to start with the official version first, the 1838 version, the version we have in the Pearl of Great Price. Why did you choose that one instead of, say, the 1832 version?
Great question. I picked that one because the catalyst that caused Joseph to remember as he did, I think, the most important determinant of that is the rejection he received from the Methodist minister. So the 1838 account is the one that tells us that, right? A few days after the vision, I happened to be in company with the Methodist minister who'd been influential in getting up the religious excitement. Joseph anticipates a welcome response, a validation of his experience. He tells the minister, and he gets instead an unexpected and traumatic rejection. James Allen, the founding father of First Vision studies, he was the first to suggest that event, that rejection, shaped the way Joseph thought about and remembered and told about his vision. And I believe that. The more I thought about memory and Joseph's memories in terms of psychology, the more I thought that Professor Allen's thesis was valid, that there was really something to it. And so I interpreted Joseph's tellings of his vision, all of them, as in one way or another responses to that first experience of telling the vision. So that's why I started with the 1838. Then I backtracked and said in 1832, he is trying to satisfy that minister. He's trying to tell the experience in a way that is acceptable to the culture, to the Protestant evangelical culture. He's trying to make it sound like a generic enough conversion account that he's not going to get in trouble for it. He's not going to be rejected. Nobody likes to be rejected. It was traumatic for Joseph to be rejected. I'm not suggesting that he consciously thinks all these things. I don't see any evidence that he deliberately decides to remember in these ways. I think, rather, these are unconscious kinds of decisions. I think that ever after the minister rejects him, he has to respond to that experience in some way or other. And when he tells the vision, part of what he's doing is responding. So that's my thesis. That's why I did it the way I did. I can say more about that if you're interested.
No, definitely. Keep going.
When Joseph intentionally plans to remember the vision, that is what's called in memory studies strategic retrieval. He's going to write autobiography. He sits down, he's intentional about it. When that happens, a kind of brain work and a psychological response occurs where he seeks for the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. And when he does that, he's going to associate those points in time with emotion. He's going to associate past events with emotion. He's going to feel. He's going to have a psychological reaction. When Joseph intentionally thinks about writing autobiography, as he's doing in both 1832 and 1838, in other words, he's going to have an emotional response that he's going to write to. So my theory is that in 1832, his attempt is to minimize the tension between him and the culture, right? the minister represents the world Joseph lives in, the culture he has to inhabit. And there's tension between that culture and Joseph Smith, the revelator, the bringer forth of the Book of Mormon, right? Joseph, I think, wants to minimize that tension, just as you or I might want to minimize tensions between us and the main currents we have to swim in. So I believe his way of doing that is to tell the 1832 story the way he does. I don't think he's satisfied with it, though. I don't think when he's done with it, it feels like it explains his present very well. Right? It responds to his past in a way that might be psychologically healing, or he hopes will be minimally objectionable to the minister and the whole culture the minister represents. But when Joseph is done, I don't think it feels like it is accurate to who he, I don't think he feels like the 1832 memory is accurate to who he is in the summer or fall of 1832. The recipient of Doctrine and Covenants section 76, of section 84.
Now, 76 occurred in 1832 as well, right?
February 1832, right? And then that summer, late that summer, 84. So you've got these expansive revelations that go well beyond evangelical soteriology. They go well beyond the Book of Mormon in terms of the doctrines of salvation and priesthood work and mediation of priesthood through ordinances and covenants and temple work, right? This is beginning to be unfolded in the exaltation doctrines in section 76 and how that applies to temple work in section 84. So Joseph, as a present prophet, president of the church of Jesus Christ in the summer and fall of 1832, is not the hurt kid, the teenager, who a few days after the vision was rejected by a Methodist minister. And the sort of the gap, the gulf between those selves, right, that he has, factors into the way he remembers the vision. And what I'm saying is, I think that his 1832 telling of the vision is a way to psychologically avoid the pain, the trauma of being rejected the way he was when he first told the vision. But I believe as he tells it that way, it's unsatisfying to him in his present role, right? In his grown-up role, his prophetic role. It doesn't sound like the president of the Church of Jesus Christ and the revelator of section 76 and 84. Now, not everybody sees it that way. I understand that. This is a lot of theoretical, hypothetical work on my part. Ann Taves and others have articulated other positions and other ways of reading the same evidence. And I'm open to all those. I'm excited to hear any kind of reading of the evidence that's responsible and engages it on a serious level. I'm not sure I'm right, but I was really compelled by Professor Allen's interpretive cue that run-in with the Methodist minister was formative for Joseph, that it was traumatic, and that it shaped ever after the way Joseph responded. So I'm saying that in 1832 he responds in one way.
Is this a way where he's trying to act mature and trying to downplay the persecution? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
What I'm trying to say is that in 1832 he tells the vision in a way that is minimally conflicting with the evangelical Protestantism that is the dominant cultural scene for him. In other words, it's in a way that's going to be acceptable to that Methodist minister, perhaps. Now, that's one way to read the evidence. There are you could make cases against it.
Well, let me throw another case against it then,
Great.
if I may.
Please.
So and Dan's the guy that I've talked to first about this, so I'm going to probably bring a lot of Dan Vogel in here. So one of Dan's issues with the 1838 account is he's noted some anachronisms. Mm-hmm. Dan believes that Joseph had a born-again experience. There was no vision, but he had a born-again experience in either 1820 or 1821. I mean, we're not super sure if it was 1820 or 1821. It was my 14th year, my 15th year.
Yep.
But somewhere around there, Joseph had a spiritual experience.
Right.
And so Dan makes the case that, Methodists especially, and so it's interesting to talk about the Methodist minister, wouldn't have batted an eye because a lot of Methodists of the day had visions of Jesus, and so it doesn't make sense that he came out in, let's say, 1820 and said, I told my mother Presbyterianism is false, because Dan makes the case that when Joseph was 12 years old, he already knew all the churches were false. So he sees that as an anachronism, and that wouldn't have even happened. And then the second thing is, and I know you get into this in part 3, you talk about Wesley Walters, back in, I believe it was the 60s, 70s, says that there were no revivals in Palmyra until 1823 or 24. And so Dan makes the case that he couldn't have told anybody in 1820 that all the churches were false. Mm-hmm. There were no revivals. That didn't happen for 3 or 4 more years. So what do you make of Dan's interpretation of those events there?
Well, just like me, you have to read meaning into the facts. Wesley Walters or Dan Vogel or Ann Taves or Steve Harper has to read meaning into the facts. All we know are a few facts. And we often think we know more than we know, right? To decide whether something is anachronistic or not, how do you know, right? Do you have enough pieces of the puzzle to know if it's anachronistic?
But if you know there weren't revivals until 1823...
Do you know there weren't? No. You know that there's no evidence in the newspaper, for example. So Wesley Walters takes the area, the geographical area, to be Palmyra Village. And he shows that there are no newspaper accounts of camp meetings in the Palmyra Village area in the 1820 window. That's what he knows. So let me be crystal clear. The fact is that, and he overstated it, Milt Bachman did find a reference to a camp meeting in early 1820 in a Palmyra newspaper. So Wesley Walters knows that the facts are that in the records he researched, there was little to no mention of unusual religious excitement in Palmyra Village in 1820. Well, what he doesn't know is there unusual religious excitement in the whole district of country where we lived, right? That's Joseph's line. Joseph doesn't say Palmyra Village. He says the whole district of country, indeed the whole region of country, right? Joseph locates the unusual religious excitement around Manchester, which is actually where his family lives. They don't live in Palmyra at the time of the vision or within a couple of years of it. So you can't decide whether something's anachronistic or not if you are deciding all the parameters of that. You can't be too close-minded about what Joseph means. One danger is not listening to Joseph well enough, deciding what he means. This is, I think, a problem with quite a lot of people, believers, unbelievers. They think they know what he means before they know what he means, right? So I'm not sure I know everything he means, but I am more inclined to let him explain himself. I'm inclined to listen to him and trust him. I believe he tells an accurate story. Now, I'm not saying it's not distorted. I think he probably did blend memories about Presbyterianism. The idea of saying, Mom, I know for myself Presbyterianism isn't true. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a later 1820s memory.
Yeah, because doesn't his mother and sister join the Presbyterians in about 1823 or 24?
We don't know when they join, right? That's another thing people assume. We do not know when they join. The records don't exist. We know when they leave the Western Presbyterian Church. We don't know when they join. If we did, it might help us sort through some of these things. Assuming that we know when they did is a problem.
Well, aren't there Presbyterian newspapers around 1823-24?
Yeah.
So does it seem likely that that's when that would have happened?
It does to me. In other words, it seems likely to me that, Mom, I've learned for myself Presbyterianism isn't true, is likely an 1822, 23, 24 conversation. I wouldn't be surprised about that. But I don't take that to mean that if Joseph blended that memory with the day he came home from the grove and a later memory, I'd be okay with that. The reason I say that is because that line is a later emendation. That's a redaction to his manuscript history. It's not there in the original flow of the writing. Joseph didn't remember that in that earliest day
in this 1838 account
that he remembered it, right? That's an 1842 Willard Richards insertion, probably at Joseph's behest. Joseph might be saying, Willard, I remember, put that in too. And it wouldn't be a surprise to me if Joseph is blending memories, right? We all do this. This is not a conspiracy. He's not manipulating anything. If he's doing what I think he might be doing, he's doing it unconsciously. That is, he's remembering an event that happened later as if it was part of the event that involved the grove in his first prayer.
Well, and that's what I said to Dan. I said, so what if he had a born-again experience in 1820, had another experience in 1823, and just combined those together? And maybe the 1823 was where he saw somebody. I mean, is that a possibility? It's not really in the historical record, right?
It's all possible, right? I trust Joseph, though. I find no reason to disbelieve his accounts. In other words, people, Walters and Vogel, they read the accounts with a hermeneutic of suspicion. It's impossible to them that Joseph Smith was telling the truth about seeing God and Christ in the grove. It's not impossible to me. And that makes all the difference, right? I read Joseph with a hermeneutic of trust. And so other people would approach him and say, he can't possibly be telling the truth, so I must find an alternative explanation for why he says what he says. I read him and I say, I think he is telling me the truth. So I take him pretty well at face value, right? And either of those are live possibilities. And we all know the same evidence, right? I don't know more facts than they do, and they don't know more facts than I do about these historical records.
I am curious, because you did say you found something from 1820 in Palmyra. Could you tell us a little bit more
Professor
about that?
Bachman did, right? So after Wesley Walters published his path-breaking article, where he said, you can't prove whether a vision happened or didn't, but you can prove whether there was unusual religious excitement on the subject of religion when and where Joseph said there was. And I dug into all the newspaper records and all the church records at Palmyra Village at that time, and I found there was no evidence of unusual religious excitement. Therefore, there could have been no resulting revelation, right? It was not a catalyst for an early spring 1820 vision. Well, that unleashed a whole bunch of research, right? What Professor Walters did, though ingenious, was fallible in a couple of ways. It argued an irrelevant proof in one sense, right? And it argued a negative proof in another. And so people set out to see what other evidence there might be. And among these people was Milton Bachman, a University of Pennsylvania PhD, well-educated, Latter-day Saint. And he dug into the whole region of country, right? He used Joseph Smith's geographical scope. Joseph used a Methodist term. The whole district of country seemed affected by the unusual religious excitement. So where Wesley Walters cast his net small in Palmyra Village, a few miles north of Joseph Smith's farm, Professor Bachman cast his net wide around the whole area of country, the whole district. And what he found was lots of evidence for unusual excitement on the subject of religion. The word revival, right, comes up often, as if that's the measuring stick. A revival is the measuring stick. And what often happens is people think a revival equals a camp meeting. All those things are related, but they're not all the same thing. And if you confuse them for the same thing, you might mistake what you're looking at, right? So there is evidence for a camp meeting in the newspaper in Palmyra in 1820. Professor Bachman found it, quoted it in his resulting article and work, right? But, is that an unusual excitement on the subject of religion? Professor Bachman didn't think that one mention of that was, but he found plenty of examples of spikes in church attendance and church membership in various churches within a 5, 10, 15-mile concentric circles. He found, in other words, evidence for unusual excitement on the subject of religion in the region or district of country that Joseph was saying. And he also didn't circumscribe it so much in time as the Reverend Walters did. Joseph didn't say it happens right, in the first days of 1820. Joseph gives more possible time for that unusual excitement. And if you reach back into mid-1819, you find Methodists having conference meetings within a day's walk of Joseph's home. Hundreds of Methodist ministers convening in this area. They'd have their conference meetings, and then they would spread out into the villages and preach. That happens in 1819, and it happens again in 1820, within, again, a day's walk. It's not credible to argue that Joseph Smith could not have any basis for concluding that there was unusual excitement on the subject of religion in the district of country where he lived. That's simply hiding evidence. Now, how you interpret that evidence, that's up to you. But to say it doesn't exist is irresponsible.
Okay, so you think that there's evidence of as early as 1820.
Absolutely.
That Methodist, so it's funny that we keep going from Methodist to Presbyterian.
Right. They're both active, right? Okay. The Presbyterians are not too out there, right? They've got a couple of impressive churches in Palmyra Village, settled ministers, right? Well-educated ministers. They are the folks who've been around longest. They have the market share. They're the most respectable, right? Lucy Mack Smith's heritage goes back into this tradition. She aspires to be a member of the Western Presbyterian Church. And in the meantime, you've got these upstarts, Methodists, right? They're brand new, relatively speaking. And they have ridden into town, literally, the horseback, right? The famous Methodist preacher on horseback, that image from the 19th century that's going to become iconic. He's going to come into town. He doesn't even have a church. He just says, away down on the campground on the Vienna Road, we're going to have a meeting. I'm going to exhort. And anybody who needs to be saved, you come there and we will get to work. And this is appealing to lots and lots of people for all kinds of reasons. We know this is happening. One reason we know it's happening around the region and in the district of country where Joseph lives is the journals of a fellow named Benijah Williams. These journals are now at the University of Santa Barbara, University of California, Santa Barbara. They've got them in their library. Professor Taves read them. I've read them. Others have read them. And they evidence the kind of thing that a Methodist minister is doing and thinking about and worried about in that time and place. And it's just what Joseph Smith is talking about. So it's not credible to say that Joseph's records are, you can totally impeach him, that his facts are totally false or anachronistic. That's just a way of saying I select some facts and reject others and therefore find Joseph anachronistic. I don't think that's a good way to do it.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Steven Harper. In our next conversation, we'll talk about whether the accounts of the first vision can be trusted.
So the way that has Joseph Smith being unreliable. That's one interpretation, but it's not the only one. It's not the only credible one. It's not the only one you can make if you're smart, and the other ones are dumb. There are believing ways to understand Joseph that fit perfectly well with his time and place. He doesn't have to be impeached as anachronistic or unreliable as a rememberer.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, sign up at patreon.com/gospeltangents, and for $5 a month you can hear the entire interview without any interruptions. If you'd like to see the whole video, that's just $8 a month, and you can sign up either at youtube.com/gospeltangents or on our website at gospeltangents.com and click the yellow subscribe button. Or you can go to patreon.com/gospeltangents, and I'll just need to make sure that we're Facebook friends, and I'll add you to our insiders group, and you can see the entire interview uncut. If you'd like to get PDF transcripts of our interviews, those are just $10 a month. And for just $15 a month, I will send you paperback versions of our transcripts as soon as they come out. Or, of course, you can buy them on Amazon as well. Go to Amazon.com and do a search for Gospel Tangents interview, and you can see all of our transcripts there. Don't forget to sign up for our updates at facebook.com/gospeltangents. Of course, you can follow us at Gospel Tangents on Twitter. To hear our interviews updated to your podcast player, go to tinyurl.com/gospeltangents, and make sure you give us a 5-star review. And of course, you should show your support for Gospel Tangents with one of these cool t-shirts, like this green one, or light blue, sport gray, royal blue, purple, of course black, beautiful gold, and of course Utah red. I've probably left out some colors, but if you want to see more, go to gospeltangents.com/shop and you can get one of these. So once again, thanks for listening. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some more of our great videos. Thanks again.